You're watching Laura Collins, the channel where we break down the most extraordinary moments in modern warfare, strategy, and military intelligence. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now, because what we cover here, you simply will not find anywhere else. And if you're already part of this community, drop a comment below and tell me, do you think small drones are changing warfare forever? Let's get into today's story, because this one will genuinely shock you. Tonight, we are going to walk through one of the most calculated, precisely engineered military strikes of the entire Ukraine war. No fighter jets, no cruise missiles, no billion-dollar bombers, just 18 small drones, 6 technicians in a pine forest, and a plan so intelligent it made one of Russia's most fortified ammunition depots destroy itself from the inside out. In under 2 minutes, over 400 short tons of artillery shells, dozens of Iskander M ballistic missiles, and thousands of FPV drones erupted in a chain reaction behind concrete walls more than 2 feet thick. The material loss exceeded 300 million, and the entire operation cost Ukraine roughly $540,000. That ratio is not a typo. This is the story of how Ukraine found the lungs of Russia's war machine and made them collapse. At Noskursen, deep inside Russian-occupied territory, the night sky split open without warning. A fireball tore upward through the darkness, and a column of black smoke climbed more than 1,000 feet into the southern sky. Windows shattered half a mile away. A Russian command post went completely dark within seconds of the initial blast. In under 2 minutes, over 2,400 short tons of artillery shells and dozens of Iskander M ballistic missiles detonated in a catastrophic chain reaction. All of it happening inside concrete walls more than 2 feet thick, walls that were specifically designed and built to protect exactly this kind of payload. The beating heart of Russia's firepower along the Kherson-Zaporizhzhia axis was collapsing from within. No aircraft crossed the sky. No cruise missiles were tracked on radar. No special forces team breached the perimeter. What had just dismantled one of the most heavily defended ammunition hubs in southern Ukraine was a 3-layer air defense fortress that had been pierced so cleanly, so surgically, that it never even grasped it had been breached until it was far too late. The defensive architecture built to make any attack prohibitively expensive had become the very mechanism of its own destruction. To understand how an ammunition depot located 52 miles behind the front line became an inferno in just 113 seconds, shaking the supply corridor running from Crimea northward, we have to rewind the clock exactly 72 hours before the sky ignited. 3 days before the explosion, a KH-11 reconnaissance satellite orbiting at nearly 290 miles above the surface of Earth swept silently over a strip of farmland in the Kherson region. According to publicly described specifications, this system achieves image resolution measured in mere inches from orbit. What it captured that day showed no tanks, no missile launchers, no military vehicles of any kind, only 14 newly painted pale blue warehouses arranged in 2 perfectly symmetrical rows in the middle of what appeared to be an unremarkable empty field. To a casual observer, this was nothing. To a trained intelligence analyst, it was everything. Inside Ukraine's military intelligence headquarters in Kiev, a 29-year-old imagery analyst locked onto a subtle but critical anomaly. The warehouse rooftops were registering 6 to 7 degrees Fahrenheit cooler than the surrounding ground. It was not a shadow. It was not a data artifact. It was thermal inertia, the unmistakable signature of thick reinforced concrete and industrial-scale climate control systems running continuously beneath the surface. This was not a grain storage facility or a civilian repair depot. It was the largest Russian ammunition hub in all of southern Ukraine, storing an estimated 1,400 to 1,600 short tons of artillery shells, dozens of Iskander M missiles, and approximately 3,800 FPV combat drones. Its total material value approached $320 million size. Strategically, it was the nerve center powering Russian offensive operations across the entire Kherson-Zaporizhzhia axis. Ukraine had not just located the target. They had identified its single exploitable weakness, And that discovery would determine everything that followed. Every bunker must breathe. The warehouse walls, 24 to 28 inches of reinforced concrete, were designed to absorb fragmentation and deflect external blast pressure. But the climate control system, keeping those ammunition stores stable, required ventilation. Metal-grated ventilation clusters sat exposed on the rooftops, feeding the internal exhaust system. Those rooftop lungs produced the abnormal heat signature the satellite had detected. Ukraine now knew the walls could not be broken from outside, so the plan was never to smash the wall. The plan was to make the depot open itself from within. At 6:14 in the morning, near the M14 highway junction, approximately 87 miles north of Novolazarivka, 3 aging KAMAZ trucks rolled south through early morning mist, deep inside occupied territory. The company logos stenciled on the doors read, Agricultural Technical Repair Services. The paint was faded. The tarps were torn. The vehicles were perfectly forgettable. Their paperwork was airtight. Contract codes matched active service records. Red authorization stamps were freshly applied, and every document was consistent. On paper, these trucks were carrying routine road construction equipment. In reality, beneath civilian cargo packed over shock-absorbing foam, sat 18 UJ-22 airborne drones with their wings carefully removed for transport. Each drone weighed approximately 187 pounds and stretched nearly 11 feet across when fully assembled. Each cruised at 70 to 75 miles per hour. Each carried in its nose a roughly 44-pound shaped charge PBX warhead, engineered not to crack concrete from the outside, but to punch cleanly through ventilation grills and detonate deep inside warehouses packed with artillery shells and solid fuel ballistic missiles. Over 48 hours, these trucks passed through 5 Russian military checkpoints. Clean documents, fluent dialect, and a thin envelope with $300 tucked beneath the invoices. No inspections, no unloading orders. At the final checkpoint, less than 65 feet from the barrier, a sergeant made a joke about potholes and waved them through. At 2:20 in the morning on the night of the attack, in a pine forest approximately 41 miles northeast of the target depot, 6 Ukrainian technicians began assembling the drones by hand. There were no headlights, no raised voices, only faint infrared light gliding across composite wing frames and metal fittings as each component was fitted, checked, and secured. Wings locked into position, bolts tightened, battery packs connected, inertial navigation systems spun up to operational status, nose cameras calibrated, target coordinates and flight corridor data uploaded through encrypted satellite communication links. Every drone received a designated role: decoy, primary striker, or hunter-killer. No one in that forest discussed the possibility of failure, but every technician understood that at least 1/3 of the aircraft assigned to this mission would not be returning. At 2:47 in the morning, 18 electric motors began to spin. The sound was low, steady, and almost completely swallowed by the surrounding wind. One by one, the drones lifted off, climbed to their assigned altitudes, and separated into 3 distinct attack corridors. 6 decoys climbed to approximately 720 feet, broadcasting open navigation signals and flying a direct vector toward Novolazarivka. They were specifically programmed to be detected as early as possible. Their entire purpose was to be seen, tracked, and engaged. 8 main strike drones flew terrain-hugging routes at approximately 130 feet with GPS completely disabled, relying solely on inertial navigation combined with terrain-matching visual algorithms to stay on course. The final 4 Hunter drones held an altitude of roughly 300 feet, flying slightly slower, waiting for their moment to strike the Pantsir air defense batteries directly. South of Kherson, the sky remained quiet. No sirens, no tracer fire, just 18 silent points of electric light advancing through the night toward a fortified steel fortress they had been built to make open its own doors. At 3:02 in the morning, inside the Russian Air Defense Command post at Novolazarivka, Lieutenant Colonel Dmitry Sokolov stood before the radar display of a Pantsir S-1 system, pale green light reflecting off a face that was tired but alert and focused. 3 Pantsir units were deployed in a triangular formation over the depot, their coverage zones deliberately overlapping to eliminate blind spots between systems. Behind that inner defensive ring stood an S-400 long-range surveillance unit. Deeper still, electronic warfare systems sat ready to saturate critical communication and guidance frequencies. On paper, this was a defensive architecture constructed to make any attempted intrusion cost more than any attacker could afford. At 3:11, 6 clear radar tracks appeared in the northern sector. Moderate altitude, direct vector toward the depot. Sokolov did not rush. He called for electro-optical confirmation first. Infrared imagery confirmed small drone-type targets, weak thermal signatures, steady movement, no evasive behavior. 2 Pantsir systems fired. White-hot missile streaks cut across the darkness. Within seconds, 6 bright points in the sky blossomed into fireballs at 720 feet. The first wave was completely eliminated, but that was only the visible layer. At 130 feet below radar line of sight, 8 main strike drones were still advancing, skimming canal banks, sliding along forest edges, adjusting altitude by mere dozens of feet to stay beneath the physical radar horizon. At 3:13, electronic jamming intensified. GPS signals distorted. One drone's inertial system accumulated enough error to trigger a safety climb response. It rose several dozen feet above the horizon. A Pantsir locked and fired. Ukraine lost drone number 7. But during the recalibration delay that followed, the remaining 7 drones had closed to within roughly 9 miles of the warehouse row. At 3:16, Ukraine made its second move. The 4 Hunter drones activated, and their target was not a warehouse. It was the Pantsir batteries themselves. One Hunter deliberately climbed, inflating its radar cross-section to resemble a higher-value threat object. The Western Pantsir responded precisely by doctrine, lock and fire. During the guidance phase, that system's fire control radar concentrated heavily in the engagement direction. In that brief locked moment, 2 additional drones surged upward from an offset vector just a few hundred yards away. The crew reacted too late. Switching to 30mm cannons, tracer rounds slashed across the darkness. One drone disintegrated in midair. The second maintained its trajectory and slammed directly into the phased array radar assembly. The shaped charge detonated on contact, channeling its explosive energy into a focused, penetrating jet. Molten metal drove straight through the protective housing and into the electronic core. Inside the command cabin, radar screens flickered violently, then went dark. One node of the defensive triangle had been blinded. At 3:18, the 7 remaining strike drones were within 3 miles. Sokolov ordered both remaining Pantsirs to generate a 30mm cannon fire curtain, a physical wall of steel rounds saturating the approach corridor. 3 drones intentionally climbed slightly into that wall of fire, drawing the crew's targeting focus and splitting their fire control attention. One by one, they were destroyed, but every second they remained airborne was a second the remaining drones gained. At 3:19, 4 final drones were 1 mile out. No decoys remained. One last missile was fired in desperation, detonating yards behind its target. It was too late. At 3:19 and 42 seconds, the 4 UJ-22 drones did not hit the concrete walls. They hit the ventilation clusters, the lungs, punching through camouflage mesh and grills, and detonating inside warehouses packed with shells, solid fuel missiles, and drone stockpiles. 3 of the 4 strikes connected. 3 internal detonations were all it took. The chain reaction that followed was not a Hollywood explosion. It was physics executing its logic without pause. Inside Warehouse 3, 152mm artillery shells began cooking off in sequence. Concrete walls over 2 feet thick, walls designed to resist external fragmentation, now trapped the shock waves inside, amplifying pressure until the structure ruptured outward. Concrete slabs weighing hundreds of pounds became giant projectiles striking adjacent buildings. Warehouse 7 ignited next. Dozens of Iskander M missiles, though carrying no nuclear payload, released enormous energy from their solid fuel and conventional explosive warheads. The roof lifted and collapsed in flame. The second explosion merged with the first. Within moments, nearly 60 missiles and thousands of artillery rounds detonated in a single cascading chain reaction, releasing energy roughly equivalent to 8 short tons of TNT. A fireball more than 350 feet wide erupted into the night sky, temperatures sufficient to melt structural steel and fracture reinforced concrete throughout the compound. Sokolov's command post, roughly 500 meters away, convulsed violently under the overpressure wave. He was thrown from his position and severely injured. The defensive system, once considered robust, was reduced to twisted, glowing metal inside a storm of fire. At 3:47 in the morning, more than 40 miles to the northeast, the Ukrainian technical team observed the smoke column rising over 1,000 feet above the horizon. The team leader transmitted a single short message: target destroyed, exfiltration underway. Satellite imagery confirmed the full damage assessment. Approximately 56 Iskander M missiles eliminated, more than 1,400 short tons of artillery ammunition detonated, thousands of FPV drones burned, at least 2 Panzer systems destroyed or severely disabled. Estimated total material loss exceeded $300 million, achieved at a cost of roughly $540,000. That is the true arithmetic of modern destruction. Victory no longer belongs solely to the side with more weapons or thicker walls. It belongs to the side that identifies the correct weak point and strikes it with exactly enough force at exactly the right moment. And that right there is what separates great military strategy from brute force. It's not about how hard you hit, it's about where you hit. Now, I want to hear from you. If you were the Russian commander who just lost over $300 million in under 2 minutes, what changes do you make next? Do you disperse your ammunition across dozens of smaller hidden sites? Do you redesign the ventilation systems entirely? Do you double the electronic warfare envelope? Or do you rethink rear area logistics from the ground up? Drop your plan in the comments. Because honestly, some of you have tactical minds that genuinely impress me, and this is exactly the kind of debate that makes this community worth being part of. If this video gave you something to think about, share it with someone who needs to see it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is literally the perfect moment. Hit that button, turn on notifications, and I will see you in the next one. This is Laura Collins, and the next battlefield starts right here